Apologies, we're waiting for one or two members. Good evening and welcome, everybody. My apologies for the delay. It is 6:37 right now on Tuesday, January 14, 2020. We do have a quorum present, and I'm calling this meeting of the Wausau Common Council to order. We'll begin tonight's proceedings with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To take roll call, please press yes. There are 10 members present.
And due to illness, Ms. Herbst will not be with us tonight. So, right off the bat, we will start with pre-registered citizens that would like to come forward and speak on a matter being addressed tonight. We'll start off tonight with Mr. Gerald Kittle. And if you could, sir, your name, your address, and if you could limit it to 3 minutes, please.
Thank you.
And tell them what you used to do.
All right. Gerald Kittle. My address is 154-109 Split Rock Lane, Wausau, Wisconsin. And I'm here to talk about your snowball ordinance, where you want to eliminate the word snowball. I worked in the school district, or worked for the Wausau Police Department for 26 years. In 1980, I was appointed police liaison officer. They're now called resource officers. But we had an issue with snowballs, and they were at the high schools. And if you can picture Wausau East High School, because that was where most of the problem was, cars could circle around the building at noon hours, before school, after school, the buses pulled in. But when we had the fresh snow, and now I'm talking about maybe 82 or 83 is when I came here to the council to get this ordinance. Anyway, we had students that would pack those snowballs to like baseballs. They were just so solid, and they were thrown, and there was 3 key things that I looked at: injuries, safety, and probable cause for law enforcement. There was no ordinance, and we warned some of the students that that didn't help. This went on for several years, but it didn't happen every day. When we had the fresh snowfall, boy, they were made. And they threw them at students when they weren't looking. I had kids come into the office that got hit in the back. They were throwing them at cars, but you know, when you get a baseball, you don't wind up when these kids, they didn't get that far, but the attempt was there. And I was really, really concerned. The principals that I worked with, Bob Pellant at East, Jim Coonan at West, Bob Muir, John Muir, also had concerns about the snowball. We did not worry about the snowball in the family traditional fight. That wasn't an issue, because that ball, when they grabbed the snowball with that fluff after 10 feet, it broke up. But I did have that hard snowball thrown at students, at cars, at buses, and I had concerns. So I came to this city council as a liaison officer, and I asked them to provide me with an ordinance, so I had probable cause to make an arrest, and I did. And it took several winters, and we solved the problem. But I'm asking you, please do not take that word snowball out, because there could be somebody walking down the street at 8, 9 o'clock, and with today's weather, with the wet, and throw it at a car. It's going to cause injury, safety issues, and you take away that probable cause for law enforcement to act. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And for the record, I knew Mr. Kittle way back when, from 1980 to 84 at Wausau East, and I was not one of the ones throwing snowballs. So, next up, please, would be Mr. Bruce Grau. Good evening. Name and address in 3 minutes, please, sir.
I'm Bruce Grau, 1115 North 10th Street. And I want to talk about the state of equality and ask you a few questions, being our people's representatives. Just recently, there was a study that showed that Wisconsin is the most segregated state in the country for black people. And looking at what's happening in Wausau, it's not far behind. My first question to you is, can anyone tell me what the rate of poverty is in Wausau? Quite high? Okay. I was looking for something a little more specific, but what about the rate of poverty for African Americans? 41.8%. Milwaukee's 36.3%. In fact, the fastest growing minority in Wausau is Latinos. Their poverty rate is 55% compared to 25% in Milwaukee. Which racial group would you say has the most people that live in poverty in Wausau? Whites, 3,500. They're about 1.7 times more in poverty than all the other racial groups combined. Yet when we think of poverty, we think black, brown, Milwaukee. Racism, modern-day racism, is founded on anti-black racism. And whites have the false perception of immunity and distance groups from joining together to fight for our common needs. Let's look at income. The median income in Wausau is a little over $40,000, and that ranks between 293rd and 383rd in the state of Wisconsin, depending on your zip code. Male income is 1.4 times greater than female, and following the national trend, our mean income and wages are falling behind our median income. Now, you may understand what that means statistically, but in other words, our trickle-down business-first economic model seems to be tinkling down on 90% of the people with a golden parachute for the other 10% that rises up. Millions of dollars that have been handed over for development, like Yonkers, River Life, $1 million ice cream stands, I don't think have contributed much to balancing out this income and poverty inequality that we have in Wausau. And I'm afraid that the deficiency that I sense from this board here, and you're our policymakers, that you cannot comprehend the scope of inequality that exists here in Wausau. But I think you have the power to change this, and I think I would want you to consider and call upon you to think about developing an equality agenda for the city of Wausau for the decade of 2020. What does that mean? Mandating a living wage. Many cities are doing that. Taxing more the people who've benefited the most from inequality in Wausau. In Boston, they're implementing a transfer tax on property values, which is to bring in millions of dollars to help support the construction of affordable housing. Support the expansion of unions and their participation in city projects. Mandate equal pay for equal work, and create and support initiatives that help foster diversity and a sense of welcoming amongst all different levels in our society here in Wausau. I'd really ask you to prioritize us starting 2020. And thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up, Ms. Deb Ryan.
Deborah Ryan, 702 Elm Street. I wanted to address two issues. I had read about the procurement policy, and I think that's a good heads up that Tara read it. I read it a number of years ago. But for items under $5,000, I think you want to add to your manual a little bit more specifics that if you're buying items, you still need to get receipts. That's a critical part, even if it's for smaller items. And it probably would be preferable to have a purchase order. That way, it's something the supervisor for a certain department, if they're looking to go to Menards, one of the staff, and they're looking for certain supplies, that it's something that a list is put together and not, oh, I'm here, I went by this aisle and this item, it's something that we need. It should be something that hopefully the supervisor is doing and has given approval through a purchase order, and that related supervisor was then signing off on that receipt, and that receipt should be part of whatever purchase you have. You should not be doing reimbursement without some type of receipt and for the specifics of what it is. I saw the information about the ordinance about the arrows, stones, and that, and it happens back as an undergrad, back in the 70s. I worked as an archery instructor at a summer camp outside Land O'Lakes. And so it just seems that I have a neighbor that does archery practice in his backyard, and it's facing a fence, but I can see some other people in our area maybe potentially, shooting an arrow towards the back of a garage or towards the inside of a garage, maybe so that they have a natural backstop and maybe hay or something. So I think you need to look at cleaning this up a little bit more so that you can be a little bit more specific. But I would think there's a number of people that are doing target practicing in their backyard. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving forward, I have one proclamation and then also an announcement. City proclamation recognizing Martin Luther King Jr. Day, January 20th of 2020. Whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. devoted his life to advancing equality, social justice, and opportunity for all, and challenged all Americans to participate in the never-ending work of building a more perfect union. And Dr. King's teachings can continue to guide and inspire us in addressing challenges in our communities. And the King Holiday and Service Act, enacted in 1994, designated the King Holiday as a National Day of Volunteer Service and charged the corporation for national and community service with leading this effort. And since 1994, millions of Americans have helped and been inspired by the life of his work of Dr. King and to serve their neighbors and communities on the King Holiday. And serving on the King Holiday is an appropriate way to honor Dr. King, to meet local and national needs, to bring our citizens together, and strengthen our communities and nation. And the King Day of Service is the only federal holiday commemorated as a National Day of Service and offers an opportunity for all Americans to give back to their communities on the holiday and make an ongoing commitment to service throughout the year. The King Day of Service projects are being organized by a wide range of nonprofit and community organizations, educational institutions, public agencies, private businesses, and other organizations across the nation. And each of us can and must contribute to making our communities better with increased opportunity for all of our citizens. And the citizens of the city of Wausau have the opportunity to participate in events throughout our city, as well as to create and implement community service projects where they identify the need. Now, therefore, I, Robert B. Mielke, Mayor of the fantastic city of Wausau, proclaim the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday as a day of service in the city of Wausau, and call upon the people of the city to pay tribute to the life and works of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. through participation in community service projects on Martin Luther King Day and throughout the year. Earlier today, we released a press release. I just wanted to make sure that it gets out there, and it was released as far as everybody else seeing it. Some more good economic news. Wausau's 2019 new construction permit value tops $116 million. Net new construction is up a record 5%. The city's new construction permit values topped $116 million for 2019, which constitutes the second highest year on record, second only to 2017, which was $139 million. Combined the last 3 years, Wausau has experienced record new growth across commercial and industrial sectors, as well as an all-time high years in new home starts at 48 for 2017, 43 for 2018, and 45 for 2019. The Wisconsin Department of Revenue released values statewide for net new construction value, with Wausau's 5% growth as one of the highest in the state. The state and Marathon County average was 2%, along with La Crosse, Eau Claire, Green Bay, Appleton, Fond du Lac, Oshkosh, and Milwaukee all at 2%, and even with a fast-growing Madison at only 3%. I'm very proud to see another record year of new construction and development for our city. We have all worked hard together to move many projects forward and to translate our planning efforts into meaningful growth. Moving on, we also have a presentation tonight from our Department of Public Works in regards for operations for snow plowing and other things. Now, respectfully, the infamous social media and all the experts out there have made some claims that just aren't true, and I have asked our Department of Public Works Director Eric Lemon and Road Supervisor Rick Molineski to give a presentation to state the truth and the facts. We are blessed in the city of Wausau to have these folks, and I cannot stress enough how much I appreciate them and all of our employees in the city of Wausau. While people are entitled to their opinions, they need to make it right.
Thank you for having us here to kind of explain some of our operations in our winter maintenance. And at any time, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. While Eric is getting that up, a lot of these are just guidelines to what we do. I always say that snowflakes, there's never one the same. Well, it's the same thing with snowstorms. The last two storms, the last couple nights, Sunday night we started a little bit earlier. We had a little bit lower temperatures. We didn't have that mist and rain, so we attacked it a little bit different. We got out there right away. The storm on Monday night, Monday night, we left it go a little while because of the rain afterwards, because we didn't want to plow off all of the loose stuff and then have that rain hit. So a lot of that operational stuff is every time it snows, we look at temperatures, we looked at moisture, we look at the forecast, we looked at staffing levels, we look at the duration of the storm and such. So there's a lot that goes into it. Our goals and expectations are DPW strives to provide safe conditions for the public travel within the limitations of resource. Access for emergency vehicle services will be maintained without exception. And we talked about resources, I guess, in the last committee, and we know that we were overspent, and we realize that, but it's public safety that we're there. The general public can expect delays and poor driving conditions during the snow event, and conditions will improve as drivers are able to complete their plow routes. DPW winter maintenance responsibility, we have 509 lane miles of streets, 18 miles of sidewalk, 15 surface parking lots, 4 parking ramps, and parking areas and hangars at the municipal airport to maintain. Some of our duties in the winter are pre-treating or wetting, depending on the conditions and temperature, and there's a whole science of this, that we pre-wet, that keeps that bond from happening, because once that bond happens, then as de-icing operations cost us so much more to try to break that bond with a lot of salt. We try to put that brine down, and you'll see our trucks out there putting the liquid out, and it's become something that's really big in the industry or in municipalities and in the industries. We sand and salt, and plowing, of course, of streets, sidewalks, parking lots, ramps, and the airport. Snow removal, we do an extensive amount of snow removal, and a lot of it's for visibility, lane width on some of our narrower streets, bridges, to alleviate any spalling of the concrete, and also possibly a car launching over the top of the railing. And de-icing operations, of course, after a snowstorm and after the plow, and then sand barrel filling. DPW staffing levels, we have 28 drivers, equipment operators, street maintainers, and traffic maintainers. And the traffic maintainers, they both have plow routes also. So we utilize them, of course, in the summer in signs and lines, and we utilize them in the winter maintenance operation, and also some of their maintenance of their equipment when they have time. 6 equipment service mechanics, 1 fleet manager, 1 fleet supervisor, 1 superintendent, 2 street supervisors, 1 parts clerk, 2 clerical office staff, and 1 facilities manager. The route setup and equipment, we have the routes set up into a 28 separate plow routes. Right now, we're currently down one plow route and then one also on a limited basis of duty. So we are, last night, or early this morning, we were down 3 routes, which was absorbed by the rest of the crew. We have 2 or tri-axle trucks equipped with a plow, wing, de-icing equipment, 4 salt trucks equipped with plows, wings, and salt. They're with liquid tanks, and we have liquid tanks on the salt trucks to help that brine application to the salt to activate that at a much faster rate than we did when we just threw dry salt out. We have 4 end loaders equipped with plows and wings, and 1 end loader equipped with a big pusher plow that does a lot of the big parking lots, that he can take a big swat where he can. And then also we're utilizing him in some of our dead ends and circles, and that's kind of what our end loaders do too. Some of our cul-de-sacs are dead ends, and also our main drags on our islands, they take off that first cut on the top. And we have 2 motor graders with blade and wing, 1 on the east side and 1 on the west side, primarily on the main drags to do our team plowing, and then also to go up in the hills to try to scrape those hills as clean as we can. And they also are used for cutting ice and snow removal. 1 Super Duty plow truck that's in the ramps, and some of our other areas are real narrow streets. And then 3 small sidewalk units, which are 2 skid steers, and then 1, it's a lawn cutting piece of equipment in the summer, and then we utilize it, we put some tracks on it, and it also is used in the winter for plowing. DPW's fleet consists of 343 pieces of equipment. That's everything from a weed whacker to a motor grader. And the city mechanic staff is responsible for 513 pieces of equipment citywide. Winter storm planning. We utilize our local media for weather reports, and we also have 2 weather services that we subscribe to. And then a lot of the guys have their own cell phone with an app on it that they usually got better weather than office staff at times. We've got a couple of guys that are pretty good at it, and they stay right on top of it. There are lead workers that monitor the weather with the street supervisors to determine on staffing levels and when are we going to fight the storm, how are we going to fight it, the duration, all of that is a big planning process, looking at the weather. And we also, at that time, determine if we're going to pre-treat or not, and that all depends on weather, humidity, temperature, moisture content. Is it going to rain? Just wash it off, so we don't want to waste it. And then we have a small video of that operation. And I would suggest if you see that truck out there, you wouldn't follow him too very close.
So there are videos throughout the presentation, and I took them, so they're not professional, so bear with me. But I think you'll get the gist of. They're pretty short. So this is just really the brine truck going down. So when you see those lines on the street, it dries out, and you'll see those white lines on the street. That's really what helps prevent that bond. And so we like to put that down when temperatures, as Rick said, are adequate.
It also helps us on those nights that we get that frost on the bridges. It saves calling in salters later or having accidents. We can accomplish the de-icing process with that brine. And like I said, the winter storm planning is kind of a guideline, and every storm's a little bit different, but our typical way that we attack the storms are, if it starts to snow and we see wheel tracking, we call that wheel tracking. As soon as we see that the traffic is making wheel tracks in the pavement, on the pavement, we send out 4 salt trucks, 2 on the east side, 2 on the west side. We try to get our hills and our problem areas right away. Spring Street, Town Line Road, 28th Avenue, some of those that are really steep that we need to get some material on there right away. As soon as we get a little bit more snow out there, we'll send out 8 single axle trucks that are sent out to plow priority routes and also de-ice them with some sand. If we anticipate a lot of snow, what they're going to do is just stay on those priority routes. So we have the city divided up into, you shouldn't have to go more than 2 blocks after you get off of one of those priority routes to get home. And then we come back with a cleanup after we give them some rest. Now, if it's just a little bit of a light dusting or a couple, 3 inches of snow, we try to make a pass up and down the middle of each street to try to clear it as best we can before we have to send them home for some rest. All drivers will plow their routes until the end of their shift. And basically, we have to give them some separation because the same person that fights that storm during the day are the same personnel that comes in, say, 6 or 7 hours, 8 hours later to plow the whole city and make sure that everything is plowed and salted. And we try to end by 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning because of commerce and because we all need safe roads to get to work. In the meantime, when we send those people home, we have a second shift person. We have one person on that takes care of the arterial streets to keep them open and responds to any calls from dispatch. Like I said earlier, if there's an emergency respond, we will respond. One way or another, we will make sure that we have staff and we get those fire trucks or those ambulances or whatever we need to do in an emergency response. That's the way we're set up, and that's our philosophy. Cleanup plowing typically happens from 10:30, 11 o'clock to 7 a.m., or it could take longer in a non-average storm. Average storms, we typically have our routes set up in about an 8 or a 10-hour shift that we can clear. But of course, if we have more snow, it's going to take us longer. After-hours storms are handled in a similar fashion. We have personnel that's on 24/7 to answer any calls from dispatch, but they also monitor the weather, because typically if we get a call from dispatch, it's too late. We like to get out there before we have 5 cars on Bridge Street and 3 on 17th Avenue all tangled up, and there's an officer there trying to get those cleared. So we try to be reactive or proactive rather than reactive, and we've learned from the past that that's the better way to attack those storms. On-call personnel will call in the crew as needed for current conditions, depending on what's happening on the street. The department does have a number of people that we have from the sewer and water utility for backup, and we try to train as many as we can. Of course, time allowed again, because they also have sewer backups, they have water breaks, things that they need to do, but we have utilized them in the past when we exhaust our staff. Once the accumulation of the snow is on the city streets, snow removal activities are scheduled. Typically, we'll have 10 to 12 of our 28 will go on third shift to do a lot of we start at the downtown, we move to our bridges, our west side businesses, and major arterial streets as necessitated by traffic conditions. Bridge Street's one. Scott Street has been a real issue since it was 3 lanes. Now it's going to go back down to 2, which will help that, because we know that when Scott Street gets snowbanks and we have 3 lanes and 2 lanes of parking, it's really tight. I like to take the center lane. Daytime snow removal is also on some of our main streets, but typically it'll go into our parking ramps, our structures, parking lots, dead ends and circles, and narrow streets and problem drainage areas. And then also around schools where we see issues with visibility problems and some drop-off areas that we try to get to. Some challenges during plowing. As it's reared its head in the past few weeks, the garbage receptacles has become an issue. Placing them in the street means we can't do our job and we can't plow the snow out to the gutter line where it needs to be plowed. If we have to come back, it's very costly, and then you fill up everybody's driveway and they're generating phone calls down to us. Not real happy that they shoveled yesterday and they actually had their garbage placement in their driveway or where it was supposed to be, and now we filled up their driveway again. So it's a two-found thing, and I understand with the snowbanks being so high, we realize we've got some empathy for it. There's not a whole lot of room to put them. The driveways are getting narrower and narrower as the snowbanks get taller and taller, and then also parked cars. And I think we've got a couple of videos we wanted to show then.
Yeah, so we just set up, there's no new snow on the street, but just so you can kind of see how the driver comes through and what they see on a typical scenario. So typically, when they move around the garbage cans, you know, they'll get as tight as they can, but they'll pull out, but they're leaving all that snow in the street, and that's the snow that's gonna come back in the driveway when they come back to do cleanup. He'll continue to move down with some more cans. Typically, what we see is on those blocks, it's not just one or two. I mean, it's probably 50-60% of them are in the street. And so it does clear up, so, and then, you know, so he'll continue to pull out, and then we'll also run into scenarios if we don't have a snow emergency on, or sometimes when we do, there'll be cans on one side and a vehicle on the other, and it will slow him up as far as picking up his wing, moving over to one side, trying to, you know, all in the meantime, just leaving additional snow on the street for further cleanup at a later date.
I told him not to hit my truck, so. So he raised his wing up.
So then we're leaving that windrow, you know, about a third into that drive lane that is going to restrict traffic to moving around. And our next video down the bottom is really the parked cars. So these are two cars that were left from a small snow, and obviously they haven't moved a couple days later, so, you know, if we were to get more snow, he would come in, get as close as he can without hitting them, hopefully, and then, but he would have to move all the way across to the other side of the street if he wants to keep the wing down. And if there was snow there, then we just push the snow into the cars. And we run the risk of any damage to there, so we definitely don't want to be damaging people's vehicles and other assets that people have.
And talking about the planning of a snowstorm, our snow emergencies, the past one we just had a week or so ago, we worked with the police department, and it was one of our best events we've had. My crew was just very, very pleased with the police department, put some CSOs on. When our drivers had direct contact with them, and having that direct contact, it would be sometimes less than 5 minutes that they would have a person over there getting a ticket. We also were proactive, and we found that there was an apartment complex out on the west side that we experienced. We never had a car on 56th Avenue before, but now we had 37 of them this last snowstorm before this past one. And what had happened is the complex put a sign in their parking lot that said, if it snows more than 3 inches, park on the road until we get the parking lot cleaned up, or you will be towed or ticketed. So it was kind of an impact, but Cord had called or emailed them and let them aware of that there was a snow emergency, so they wouldn't have 37 cars with tickets on them. There wasn't any cars there. So working together with the police department, it was a really great, successful run. Because if you can imagine that you've got to do that all night long on your route, either it's garbage day or there's parked cars, it's going to take you 2 more hours to do that. And hopefully you're not going to hit anything and have a liability issue. So, I guess, any questions so far? Or Ms. Lawrence?
I've heard from other people too, and I've scratched my head for years looking at the plow driver, and they do a great job. It's not a complaint. It's kind of a question about perception. It seems like the driveways on my side of the street get more, is it windrow, whatever you called that thing, than the other side.
We tried it.
How does that work?
On a narrow street, if you look at the plow width and the wing, that first pass might get a little more. It might be an issue with, there weren't any driveways on the road that he just came off of, and he's got that locked into his plow and wing. So when you get to a driveway, you might get more. Cornered lots are typically, you're going to get more because he doesn't have any place for that snow to go as he rounds that corner. The first opening is the least resistance, and that's where it's going to end up. We do get that calls periodically, And we try our best to try to give equal, even if he has to leave the wing up on a very narrow street, which sometimes you have to. When I plowed, I know I plowed like Lubner and some of the division and stuff. I would actually go down both ways, so tried to give equal treatment to both. It is a concern that we do get that call. And sometimes, you know, it's almost the end of winter, but the side that got snow or sun all winter has less than the other side. And so that's, you know, because it did melt more on that side. But we try to break it up best we can, that everybody gets equal treatment. And okay, snow removal. And this is a typical, this is Bridge Street actually a few days ago. We tried to get Bridge Street, we had some concerns that the driveways, because we've got 4+ lanes of snow at the end of their driveway, visibility backing out onto Bridge Street, which traffic isn't going 25, is a concern. So I know we had a lot of compliments after we got out there. There was some concerns that people called, and we got after it as soon as we could between snowstorms, and it did help a lot.
So here, you can see the graders coming in, and they're actually pulling the snow into the street. And then the second video will show how we kind of get it off of the street, back off of the street. During this operation, we have about $1 million, maybe a little more than $1 million worth of equipment rolling down the street. So it's, yeah. And so I think a lot of traffic, they get a little frustrated, you know, because they're driving 10 or 15 miles an hour while this is going on, but we appreciate their patience as we get this cleared up. And then the blower is down behind the grader and blows it into the truck. And then we haul it off to one of the snow storage areas or snow dump sites is probably what you hear.
We do supply sand barrels in 90 different locations, actually 91, because our biggest one is right in front of our office. And that's available from 7 to 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, whenever, Monday through Friday. And typically, like last year, we didn't get time to go out and fill them. The snowbanks got so high you couldn't find them. And so we actually have a pile at our shop that anybody can come down, show your ID, just like the yard waste site, whatever, fill up your sand, and you can utilize it. That's mixed with 5% salt to help it melt the snow and ice, and also to keep it from freezing into a hard chunk. And we have a video of them filling it up. We used to fill it by hand, climb up on the truck, and when we had one gentleman fall off the truck and break his arm, we thought we should maybe go to a more modern system. So this is our second attempt. It's a conveyor. We had an auger, our first attempt that we built it, and we had a local manufacturer make this for us, Kafka conveyors. We utilized a past salt truck to do that, and those trucks are on swap loaders, so that truck, we can drop that sand barrel filler off within 10 minutes or so, unhook some hoses, drop it off, and put any, like a salter on there, or a sander, or a snow box that we can haul material with. So it utilizes that cabin chassis where we don't have specific trucks for that.
This other video is really just spreading sand on the street, so you'll see them in a residential area. They'll drift over from side to side in order to get near the stop signs and lay that sand. The video's not real clear, but and then periodically, it won't be constant sand coming down as you'll see, but you'll see some spreading. And they typically do drive down more of the center of the road because the spinner in the back can be regulated to try to spread that sand across both drive lanes at the same time. But at the intersections, they will go lane to lane, so.
We try to do about depending on the conditions, we try to do about a 3-car length stop, if you can think about that at your intersections. If it's a more icy condition, they put a little more, and if it's less, we try not to use it, if it's not icy. We have 3 different areas that we have snow disposal. They don't like it called snow dumps anymore, so I have to call it a snow dump, or a snow disposal area. Just like it's the West Business Campus, it's not the industrial park anymore. So I try not to make that mistake, but I do once in a while. One is on River Drive, where we have the summer farmers market. Another one's behind the Grand Avenue Cemetery off of Curling Way. And then we also have one when 51 and 29, where the flyover was built up by Menards, that land underneath there was planned for snow disposal also. So we utilize that with the county. The county takes it off all of those high bridges and dumps there also.
So this video is just one of the snow storage areas. This is one on River Drive. We do have to maintain them to try to maximize the space that we have. So really, we have a dozer out there, and he's just pushing up the snow. This is when we were having trucks coming off of Bridge Street. They were dumping here, so those piles right there, and then the dozer will just keep stacking it up the best he can.
We look at winter maintenance as a 12-month process. We get into spring, we review the effectiveness of our operational procedures. We do our route inspection and winter damage repair to streets, boulevard damage, curb damage. We also keep a documentation if somebody said that you tore up my boulevard or we have some damage. We try to keep a list that we get out and take care of those, and then try to minimize that for the future, that the plow operator will see what happened. And then the inspection and schedule of repair of winter equipment. Winter maintenance is really hard on equipment. It's hard on people and it's hard on equipment. The salt eats it up. It's a rough condition for that vehicle to be banging that plow. And also our people are, halfway through winter, you don't know what day it is, you don't know what shift you're gonna be working tomorrow. And so we have to be very thankful of that crew that gets through that. There was just something in the APWA magazine that I read today about how to minimize that. It was an Alaska staff, but they had more staffing apparently because they could staff people days for a number of weeks, and then some would be on nights. We don't have that ability. We have only the ability to be able to just kind of swing those shifts as winter progresses. But one of the things that we do have that's on our side is that in the summer we pretty much have a schedule. It's pretty much 7 to 3, limited overtime. So that's one of the pluses, I guess, a recruiting thing. Material inventory, I have to actually order salt before winter's over for next year. The state contract, we network with the other municipalities and other state entities on ordering salt. So when contractors find out what we pay for salt, which is expensive, it's $90 a ton. But when I find out what they're paying, it's good that we're on that state contract. But I have to make sure that I know how much. So we inventory, we actually have engineering shoot the pile with their instruments to give a calculation, and that's helped a lot. I used to take a tape measure out there and kind of try to calculate which. And then also figure out how much sand, salt, our chloride pellets and things like that we need for ordering for next year. During the summer, we begin our contracts with our contractors for our snow removal downtown and anything else that we do contract out. And then drainage improvements and obstacles remediation or repair. If we had a wing tore off because we hit something, we try to minimize that and try to make sure we take care of that. And drainage is a big thing. Right now, we're fighting a lot of springs because of all the moisture we've had this season. And we try to look at, with engineering, we're working on some drainage issues that we can put some drain tile or create a ditch. And it has minimized a lot of maintenance that we've had to do in the West Business Campus out on Highland Drive, where we had an issue where we had a contract that we went in and put a ditch in to capture those springs. East Wausau Avenue is a real headache up in the 1200 block. We're up there cutting ice. Steuben Street, we found a lot of them that we are going to address in the spring. We're actually working on plans right now with TJ from engineering. And in the fall, we discuss our winter strategies and our training of our new operators. We try to send 2 operators, typically a salt operator or one of our lead people, down to Madison for a 2-day course in controlling snow and ice. I went to it about 25 years ago. It's really, really a great program. They have the state-of-the-art equipment. You network with all the municipalities and anybody that's there. A lot of contractors are there. It's through the university. There's typically people from Alaska, from other countries will be there just because it's that high end of a program. Talks about the new upcoming products that we can use, some agriculture byproducts to beat heat things that we're using now to help with the environmental things that we aren't putting as much salt out. And we can get snow and ice to melt at lower temperatures with that additive. We calibrate equipment and technology devices. We bring our winter equipment online in the fall. After we're just about done with leaves, we got to switch everything over and get chains and things on, and the salt and the spreaders, and make sure the plows are all up and running. And it's really that transition. When is that going to happen? Is it Thanksgiving, or, you know, does it hit early like this year on Halloween? You know, we had snow already on Halloween. And then mark obstacles or mark our routes and install snow fences to minimize. Now, I thought maybe I should have opened up with this slide first, because we just heard from finance where we were in the budget. Last probably September, October, Bobby Splinter told me, Rick, you can't have any more snowstorms. You're out, you're done. You have to have no more. Well, I'm sorry, Mother Nature kind of did. We had 115.2 inches of snow in 2019, which broke a previous record. Our average snow is 60 inches. So if we look at 40 more inches, the percentage of that, and we wonder why we were where we were in the budget. Just because the amount of days. I know some of the guys were talking that last spring, late winter, they went like almost 30 days without a day off. But so we can thank them again for their dedication. And it was also our wettest year in Wisconsin history. Underground springs and groundwater has been affecting us. Right now, we're cutting ice in a lot of areas that we need to get that drainage, so when it does melt, we can get that to the inlets and get it to where it's supposed to be and not freeze on the road. I've got the large plow map over here, and I put the drivers' faces up there, and those are your plow guys that are in those routes. So like I said, we can be proud of them. And also, I have a typical plow route map that this is Riverview area, and as you can see, the priorities that are in red. And then there's some areas that you see aren't plowed up in that area, but they are typically a dead end, which we talked about that the end loaders would take care of those routes. So if that end loader's broke, you might have every route, all the streets around you, but that one might take a while to get done. And one of our people that are on that limited duty is one of our loader operators, so significant loss when we don't have that guy out there, because he usually takes 5% of a lot of the other people over on that east side and helps them, and because an end loader is a very efficient way to plow streets. And that's our presentation.
Real quick, just to let council members know, this is something we have discussed as far as for your neighborhood meetings. I do know of one neighborhood group that will be taking advantage of this, to have the snowplow driver there at your groups to speak with residents. The one thing I do ask, of course, is please make sure your residents are respectful. But, you know, we're trying to get it out there as far as the correct, right, proper message. It is amusing, amazing, and somewhat disappointing that folks just put something on social media and it just seems to fly. It is not the case, folks. It really isn't. We're very lucky that we have the staff that we do, both the Department of Public Works and all our departments, and I'm grateful to all of you for the work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right then, moving on, as far as the consent agenda, starting with file number 19-1201.
You're pulling off that one item?
Not yet.
Okay.
Minutes of the previous regular meeting from December 10th of 2019 and ending with file number 19-0108 from the Public Health and Safety, a resolution approving or denying various licenses as indicated. Mrs. Rasmussen?
Thank you. Just as a procedural item, were we removing 20-0107 for an amendment? That Butchkowski easement?
We can.
Because we have a new map that we need
Okay.
to address. So if we could pull that one,
Sure.
thank you.
Okay, and with the exception of file number 20.0107, accepting temporary limited easement at 1202 North 3rd Street and 1204 North 3rd Street for Bukowski. Otherwise, for the rest of the consent agenda, do I have a motion to accept? Motion by Mr. Nutting, do I have a second? By Ms. Lawrence?
You may begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
And we will move forward with the resolution of the Capital Improvement Street Maintenance Committee for file number 20-0107, accepting the temporary limited easement at 1202 North 3rd Street and 1204 North 3rd Street for Bukowski. Committee action approved 4-0. The fiscal impact will be none. Questions, comments? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to Mr. Gisselman. Motion, do I have a second? Mrs. Rasmussen? And again, Mrs. Rasmussen?
Thank you. I'll offer the amendment then that's necessary. Earlier today, we got a revised map from engineering on this. You've got a copy of that at your desks. It actually shifts the easement slightly, more so over to 1204 3rd Street versus 1202. And so I would offer the amendment that we amend this item on the floor to approve the easement using the revised map location and legal description as articulated by engineering on this new map today, which shifts that easement, if I could get a second.
Second by Mr. Nutting.
And this is the vote on the amendment. You may begin voting. Motion carries unanimously. Wait, gotta go back to the...
Go ahead, get the other one.
And this is the motion to vote on it as amended on council floor. Begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
Moving on for file number 20-0103, mayor's appointments. And this is for the Business Improvement District Board for reappointments of Robert Shepard, Alfred Nakala, Robin Buchholz, and Dave Johnson for 2-year terms to be expired on December 31st of 2021. I'll entertain a motion to accept. Mr. Neal, thank you. Do I have a second? Mr. Nutting, thank you.
May begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
File number 18-1109, a resolution of the Finance Committee approving the 2019 budget modification of the Public Works winter maintenance and increasing interest income. Committee action approved 5-0. The fiscal impact will be no increase in the budget. I'll entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Neal, second by Mrs. Rasmussen.
Begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
File number 12-0107, a joint resolution of the Human Resources Committee and the Finance Committee approving the agreement for crossing guard services with All City Management Services Incorporated. The committee action, Human Resources approved 3-1, Finance approved 5-0. The fiscal impact will be $140,190. And I will take the motion first by Mr. Neal. Do I have a second? Wait, not a lot of volunteers tonight. Come on. Okay, Ms. Lawrence, thank you. We do have Matt Barnes, our Deputy Chief from the Police Department, to address this issue.
Sure, I think most of you are part of at least one of the committees. This has been Let me start by just saying we have a tremendously dedicated staff of crossing guards that have worked for us for a long time. Some of them have been around the police department a lot longer than I have. I was probably a student in our school district when they were in their 10th year working. So we owe them a debt of gratitude. Making sure they are taken care of has been of paramount importance to the police department. However, with that being said, finding people and managing those intersections has become very burdensome to the police department. Last year, we had to use staff other than crossing guards to staff intersections greater than 120 times. That's police officers, CSOs, and our parking staff that get called upon with no notice to go make sure that our students are able to cross the road. This not only affects our staff, but us being able to provide these services is of vital importance to the school district. The number of buses and the busing routes that the school needs to fund in order to get kids to school is dependent on where we have crossing guards. Because if we have roads that are designated overly hazardous based on the amount of traffic that that's on that road, and an example of that might be Statine Drive. So for example, without a crossing guard at Statine Drive to cross a very small number of children from the trailer park to Statine, we're talking about a distance of 50 yards. They would have to bus those students those 50 yards as a result of the overly hazardous roadway. So over the last 2 years, we have worked with the school district to try and recruit people to have enough staff to do this. There have been letters and communications to grandparents, to parents asking for help, for people to come on board and assist us. There have been communications to all the paraprofessional staff offering additional hours of employment or split shifts. None of that has solved our concerns. We feel that contracting and outsourcing to a company that specializes in providing crossing guard services is our best option at this point in time. And as a partner with us, the Wausau School District is willing to help fund the additional cost of that at a rate of $44,000 annually. So when identifying All City Management Services as the vendor we'd like to use, they're really the only people that do this that we could locate in the state of Wisconsin. We verified and checked with other chiefs of police that use this company. We had no negative feedback. We had nothing but positive feedback from them. You'll see some of their comments are in your packet materials. And lastly, when working with All City Management Services, they have an interest in hiring all of our current staff to continue providing crossing guard services with very little change for them. Every single staff member of our crossing guard team will receive an increase in pay. They will still be part of the police department team that provides safe opportunities for our kids to get to school. But we feel that it's worth those dollars to make sure that we have someone that specializes in that honestly I think can do a better job than we can of finding people and putting the effort necessary to go out and recruit people to serve as crossing guards. I sat listening to the information about our plow drivers, and I got to know many of them over the last 20 years. And they don't get the credit they deserve for going out in the worst conditions and driving these giant pieces of equipment, knowing that they're going to get in deep trouble if they hit one of those cars on no sleep. But I also think some of the unsung people in our community are crossing guards that if there's school, it doesn't matter if it's raining, if it's snowing, if it's below zero, those individuals are standing out there to make sure our kids get to school safe. And I just really appreciate the work that they've done for us, and my hope is that they continue to do that in the future with this new company.
Thank you. Can vote? Oh, Mr. Peckham.
Yeah, you said that there's nobody currently, in the immediate area providing a service like this or, to recruit the staff and all that stuff. Is there any effort to find somebody who would gear up to do that? It seems like if there was somebody living here would be better than, I'm assuming the California people are going to send somebody here or hire somebody here, but how's that going to work?
The beauty of using an outsourced model where they're financially responsible for that is it's their problem at this point. I will tell you that I don't consider myself a marketing individual, but we have successfully recruited for a significant number of our crossing guards they're relatives of the manager of the crossing guards right now. He's going to brother-in-laws and saying, please come out and help us with this. So we have advertised in every way we can think of, both within the schools and mailings and partnering with them, as well as Facebook and the Wausau Daily Herald and every source we could think of to do that. I discussed this with that company, that this is the reason we're calling you, and they said we're really good at what we do. So I'm cautiously optimistic that they will be.
Mr. Nutting.
To dovetail off of Alderperson Peckham, I believe we're not their only game in the state. They have other contracts throughout other cities. Is that correct?
Correct. In your materials, you will see on the sole source document to utilize their services. I think there's 8 or 9 other. Years ago, the Wausau Police Department contracted, which is a whole nother saga, but we contracted with them. We found them to be a reputable company. We were the first company, we're the first city that they provided services for in Wisconsin, and since that time, they've grown dramatically. There was another company providing services throughout the state for these other communities. They went bankrupt and left those communities without crossing guard services. All City Management Services has come in and been able to fill that void for those communities with positive references from the chiefs of police of those organizations.
Mrs. Towle.
I did get a chance to review the agreement or the contract here. I love the fact that the ownership of the liability falls upon the contractor. I understand that the cross guards, that's not a full-time job, right? So, getting a third party to be able to find the resources to maintain the safety, for our students, I think that's really critical. I think $25.99 at that rate, I think that's pretty awesome. You really take all the issues and the problems and the liabilities, and you really give that to someone else. So I really appreciate it, and I will be supporting this tonight.
Thank you. Full disclosure, the copy of the contract that's in your materials is a work in progress. I'm currently working with Assistant City Attorney Tara Alfonso. We have a couple of sticking points that we're going back and forth on. We haven't come to complete resolution with all city management services as of right now. My hope is that all the interested parties can get on one phone call and resolve those issues, but I don't see them as being terribly significant at this time.
So is that contract rate still up for negotiation?
The price is solid, but in regards to the amount of insurance we would expect them to carry, what their liabilities are, we had several other issues that they've agreed with Tara's adjustments to the language, so.
I saw a $1 million liability policy. I know, Bob, you're back there too. I thought the school district normally offers, you have to have like a $2 million. Can you just confirm that liability policy?
I can't confirm that off the top of my head.
Bob,
Matt-
could you come up here, please, for the record, please?
Oh, sorry.
So I was waiting for a question about the school district's commitment to this project. This is Mr. Bob Tess. He's the finance director or business agent.
Let's go with that.
He's in charge of the money for the Wausau School District, and he's been my real go-to in partnering with us to try and get this situation for us resolved. So if there's any questions for him, feel free.
Thank you. We've been working on this challenge jointly for 5 or 6 years, right? So you did a nice job of highlighting all the different strategies that we applied before we came to this. We're using at the school district level a funding mechanism called transfer of service. And we need to apply to the Department of Public Instruction to use a transfer of service funding mechanism. And in my request to the DPI, it was explicit that the city was going to outsource school crossing guards. So I would have to submit another application for transfer of service if the city did anything but accessed it through an outsourced agency. So we'd have to cross that bridge if we got to it. So we're really hoping that you support this. School district can fund $44,000 annually, and that would be ongoing. So I don't know the number I heard before, if that included the school district contribution, or is that just the city contribution?
The total is just shy of $140,000, I think,
So,
annually. That includes the school district's contribution.
Relative to the limits of liability, I can't offer an opinion on what the city would require, and I don't even have mine in front of me, so I can't offer an opinion there either. I'm sorry for that.
I'll trust Matt and Tara on that one then. Thank you.
Trust is a wonderful thing. I trust Tara, so that's who I go to for that guidance.
And ironically enough, this week is Adult School Crossing Guard Appreciation Week in Wisconsin. So Superintendent Hiltz and myself will be out in the city the next couple of days and offering our appreciation for what they do firsthand. So just ironic that we're addressing this today when this is the week statewide that we're showing our appreciation.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll begin voting.
You may begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
File number 04-0306, a resolution of the Human Resources Committee approving the bargaining agreement between the City of Wausau and amalgamated, that's a good one. Thank you, Transit Union for January 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2022. Committee action approved 4-0. The fiscal impact, do we have one? Is unknown at this time, but we will get that information for you. It's just basically approving the contract with the Transit Union. I have a motion by Mr. Gisselman, a second by Mr. Nutting.
Begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
File number 20-0109, a joint ordinance of the Historic Preservation Commission and the Plan Commission, amending Section 2.82.065 of Historic Districts. Committee action approved for Historic Commission approved 4-0, and Plan Commission approved 6-0. Fiscal impact will be none. Entertain a motion to accept. Figured you would do it, Mr. Gisselman. Second by Mr. Peckham.
You may begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
File number 93-0835, an ordinance of the Public Health and Safety Committee amending Section 9.08.020, throwing or shooting of arrows, stones, and other missiles prohibited. Committee action approved 4-1. The fiscal impact will be none. Entertain a motion. Mrs. Rasmussen, do I have a second? Mr. Nutting. Mrs. Rasmussen.
Thank you. This ordinance and the proposed changes to it have not ceased to amaze and surprise me as far as the attention that they have garnered, both the existence of the ordinance in the first place, which caused the first few stories, and our proposed amendments, which caused a few more. And so what I will say is that this is the third time that the city of Wausau has dealt with stories, news stories surrounding this particular ordinance in the last 10 years. The first time, or the first couple times, they really were lighthearted, tongue-in-cheek, fun fact, you know, a cold weather city has this odd duck ordinance in their ordinance books type story. Rather benign in its impact.
That every other city has.
Well, not every, but many.
Just
And
about.
so what we experienced this time was that a media outlet from outside our area, and I want to be clear about that, our local media outlets have been nothing but supportive and accurate in their reporting of all of this. But outside our area, another one of these fun fact type stories came out, and that one had a whole lot of inaccuracy in it. And a number of you that have watched the Mayor and Deputy Chief Barnes' Facebook video understand those inaccuracies. The ordinance was not new. It was not created by the mayor. It was not intended to ban all snowball fights and all of these things that got off the ground and went viral. That said, today, in our society, people's words and people's reactions can escalate so quickly and be so extreme that that story this time brought negative press, negative social media, and I would say no end of drama over the assertions that were made in this first story that were factually inaccurate. Enough so that the mayor actually received a threat from someone in Ohio that was going to come up here and fix us for restricting the snowball fight stuff. It was menacing enough that it got referred to the police department. So that caused me to think, as a committee chair, why does this story keep coming up? And what it is that in the context of this ordinance, it's an ordinance against projectiles. And the word projectile remains in the ordinance regardless of any change we make. And so in discussing with this with the Assistant City Attorney and the committee and the police department, the enforceability and the application of this ordinance does not change one bit if we remove the word snowball. So with all respect to former Sheriff Kittle's comments about the ordinance and taking that enforceability away, their enforceability doesn't go away. A snowball or ice chunks or whatever remains a projectile, and the ordinance's use is the same. But I do think that removing the word snowball from the list of examples contained in the ordinance going forward will stem that little fun fact news cycle that has caused an awful lot of vitriol this time around. And, you know, sometimes when things get in your ordinance books and they're 50 years old, is it necessary for us ever to do a wholesale review of our ordinances? Sure. But when something comes to your attention specifically that requires a minor correction that you could fix now, there's no reason not to just fix that now. And then if you want to conduct a whole-scale review of things that may be antiquated and old in your ordinance book, you do that also. But separate from that, I think we have the ability tonight to remove one word from the ordinance, not change the way it works, but that it takes some of the newsiness out of this kitschy news stuff out of the story. And so that trigger, you know, I mean, do we still have an ordinance about arrows and rocks and everything else? Sure. Lots of places do. But the fact that we listed snowball specifically has caused a lot of misunderstandings in what the intent of the ordinance was and how we use it. And so that's why I think that a one-word change, it seems like a simple fix. It's not caving in because of what happened before. But I think that one-word fix could just, going forward, correct this whole thing. And so that's why, as a committee chair, I asked that the committee talk about it. In committee, we supported the idea of a change, just to clarify things. And so I'm hoping that we support it tonight and that going forward, we have less of that type of stuff going on. So I'm amazed still that the national and international news media cares about this. Today I was contacted by ABC News. We've appeared on CNN. The Associated Press picked up on little old Wausau. Linda was contacted last week by a reporter in New York that writes for a publication in the UK. And that with all of the things going on in the world today, one word in a 50-year-old ordinance in a little tiny Midwestern town matters. And so that's news. And
The effect snowballed.
the effects, what she said, the effect snowballed. So that's why this is here tonight. Hopefully, we can make this simple change, and going forward, we won't have this stuff going on anymore. So
For the
thanks.
record, it's a 58-year-old ordinance, and that's okay. And our city attorney, Ann Jacobson, has got some stuff to add to this.
Fun fact, I'm going to weigh in and correct the record or make the record for you. I was last quoted when I was called by an outfit in Washington, D.C. on this matter as knowing that the ordinance went back at least to 1962 because I had that hard copy in my office. Well, since that time, we located this book, and it says Charter of the City of Wausau as revised, consolidated, and amended for the year 1883 and its ordinances. And under Section 11, it says it shall be unlawful for any person to play ball, throw stones or snowballs, or other things in any street, alley, or public place in the city, or to shoot with bow and arrow or with any other dangerous toy or instrument in the limits of the city, provided that the mayor may grant permission to play ball at the public commons.
Where's Barnes?
And any person violating this section will be deemed guilty of a misdemeanor and punished accordingly. So it's been on the books since 1884 that you can't throw snowballs at people in public places. So, thank you, Mayor.
But remember, if it's on the internet, it's real. Mr. Gisselman.
Well, exactly right. You know, and I think that the word, you know, and I was talking to Attorney Jacobson, and going back that far, and I think that the word snowball within our ordinance has fared our city fairly well.
we're being driven here by social media, something that we were complaining about a half an hour ago. So I think that what drives the policies and procedures of the city, I think it's our own understanding of the law, of how we want to, I'm sure that the police department hasn't, I don't know what kind of actions the city police department has taken with snowball throwers, but, we don't have, in effect, like Jerry Kittle was saying, we don't have major fights in the city. Snowball throwing can be taken by the law enforcement as a teaching opportunity. It can be a very low-impact effort and on our behalf as part of the city. But we don't get into situations like what happened in Milwaukee, I believe, last week, when 2 children were shot because they were throwing snowballs at a car. Somebody in the car got out of the car and shot these 2 children. I think we are better than that. I think that by having this ordinance specifically referring to snowballs, we somehow give the police department and this community the ability to say, hey, wait a minute, we don't allow major snowball fights between East and West High School, between the junior high, across the river, whatever. We step in and we say that that is really not what the city stands for. And whatever date that charter ordinance was from, that was a clear understanding of what the city stood for, and it has stood that way ever since. And I think that people may make fun of the word snowball, but really it is a good word. And it is, if it's packed with ice or whatever, it is a good word in letting our law enforcement act appropriately with regard to those instances within the city. I will be opposed to changing this ordinance. Thank you.
Ms. Lawrence?
Thank you, Mayor. I support the ordinance, but I would like to have either someone from the police department or City Attorney Jacobson respond to the issue of the neighbor with archery practice. My understanding was you can't conduct that in the city. So is there any recourse for her with a concern about a neighbor practicing archery with a bow and arrow?
Yeah, there's recourse. We can cite for that if there's
Okay.
if there's a problem with that.
That's what I thought, but
And we have actually cited for that, so.
Deb, did you hear it? Call the police? I mean, I know it's hard to do to a
I would
neighbor,
recommend
but
to anybody, am I going to say that we're going to cite anybody for anything specifically? No, but certainly call us and we'll investigate it and we'll see if it's dangerous and if it meets the ordinance, and if so, we'll determine whether a citation is warranted. And, no different if it's a snowball or anything, so.
Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, well, that's just it, I can't envision anybody in our police department, maybe driving down an alley and seeing somebody with their bow and arrow in the backyard shooting at a straw target, stopping and citing them for it, because I think that would be something that would be based on complaint from a neighbor, like an errant arrow, implanted itself in the side of their house, or flattened a tire, or something like that. Much like a lot of our enforcement in the city is complaint-based, not going around and trying to find people doing things, but rather a neighbor has been bothered by something, they've contacted authorities have looked into it and made a determination whether or not there was something here that's citable. So, yes, I don't think, the arrow thing in the backyard is a problem unless they make it a problem with a neighbor. As far as the snowball thing, there's nothing by removing this word removes the police department's ability to enforce unwanted tossing of missiles, which covers just about everything you can think of that's tossable, to deal with something that is untoward in terms of behavior. And I think that's what the message we got from the video that came out, and certainly that's what the end result would be of this slight change, and take us off, the joke, social media radar by having that word live on for another 100 years. Thank you.
And you may begin voting. That motion passes 9-1.
Next up, suspending the rules. 1D, transmission of committee business to council for the items marked pending committee action. A two-third vote will be required. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Neal, second by Mr. Peckham.
Begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
And file number 20-01010, a resolution of the Common Council tonight recognizing the Lunar New Year. And Mrs. Tao, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mayor. We have tonight Melinda Osterberg. If you can come forward. She's an employee of the University of Wisconsin. She has also been spearheading the Central Wisconsin Chinese New Year Festival that's coming up on January 24th and 25th. I just want to commend her in bringing forth a resolution for us to consider recognizing and celebrating the Lunar New Year for the city of Wausau. I really appreciate her time in collaborating with other entities to bring forth similar proclamations or resolutions. She is here with us tonight. I am seeking a motion to amend the current resolution. There is some language that we're able to work together to really bring out the celebration that's upcoming and to really recognize her efforts and the efforts of the volunteers that have been working alongside of her effortlessly to put forth this resolution and the festival that's coming up. If you would like to say a few things about the resolution tonight?
Sure. So the resolution is based, as Councilperson Tao knows, on a resolution that was adopted by the state of Texas, actually recognizing the Lunar New Year. I believe that Marathon County may be the first jurisdiction in Wisconsin to formally recognize the Lunar New Year, so I was really happy that that happened in central Wisconsin. So Wausau may very well be the second municipality to recognize this holiday that's celebrated by about a quarter of the world's population. The resolution is just one part of several events we have planned as part of the Central Wisconsin Chinese New Year Festival. So Friday evening, we are partnering with the Center for East Asian Studies out of Madison on a discussion of the U.S.-China trade situation, as we know that there's an agreement being signed perhaps tomorrow. So it is very timely to figure out how those trade agreements do impact our economy here in central Wisconsin. So very much looking forward to that. We do have the DETCAP Interim Secretary Randy Romansky joining us for that discussion, as well as the Vice President of Chippewa Valley Bean, and we have an economist coming to talk about how they see those trade agreements impacting our economy. We are also partnering with the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point at Wausau on an international dinner. We're titling it Chinese New Year 101, so if you are interested in eating some authentic Chinese cuisine, learning more about the Lunar New Year, I do encourage you to attend, and registration is available through their continuing ed site. Then on Saturday, January 25th, we are having a very traditional cultural festival. So if you are interested in learning a few words in Mandarin, learning how to make some authentic Chinese food, seeing a lion dance, drum array, practicing Kung Fu or Tai Chi, it would be a great family-friendly event for you. All of the events are free, open to the public. We've been so fortunate in our community sponsors. So I do have some flyers here, so I will leave these, and hopefully I will see some of you at the festival. If you do have any questions about the Lunar New Year, the proposed resolution, please let me know. It had broad support at County Board. We were nearly unanimous. We just had one supervisor voting against the resolution, which I consider to be very fortunate given the number of supervisors.
Thank you so much. Council members, you don't have a copy of the amendment tonight, but I'm going to read the areas that we're revising. So do you want me to read it verbatim or just read it verbatim with the changes? Okay. The motion to amend the current resolution to state, whereas a portion of residents of the city of Wausau celebrate the Lunar New Year, and whereas the special holiday ushers in the spring season, a new beginning, when the community reflects on the past and makes plans for the future, and whereas the Lunar New Year, celebrated in some Asian communities, falls between the end of January and the middle of February, but the festive spirit of the season remains constant, and whereas the eve of the holiday's three-day festival is spent cleaning houses, visiting ancestral graves, and preparing a ceremonial meal. The Lunar New Year traditionally serves as a time to reunite with family members, renew special friendships, and remember past experiences in preparation for food things to come. And whereas the celebration of Lunar New Year events and programming in Wausau illustrates the city's cultural history and commitment to ethnic and cultural diversity, and whereas the Lunar New Year provides a fitting opportunity to recognize these fine citizens and to celebrate our common goals of peace and harmony for all humanity. Now therefore be it resolved that the Common Council of the City of Wausau does hereby recognize the Lunar New Year on an annual basis and encourages the citizens of the City of Wausau to learn, embrace, and celebrate the Lunar New Year, and to extend all cultures celebrating the holiday sincere best wishes for health and happiness in the coming year. I saw that somewhere. Right here. Preparing ceremonial meal
Preparation
for food. What
should
did,
it be good?
this is in preparation for, on here it says food, but, okay. So just for the record, there was a typo in here. So the fourth paragraph, let's strike out the word food and add good.
And one other thing too, we do need to take a vote as far as this originally and then to come forward with the amendment afterward.
No,
A motion,
we need a
excuse me.
motion on the original before we can take your motion for the amendment.
Mr. Neal, do I have a second? Mr. Martins?
And then for the amendment, we need a second.
I'll second.
Mrs. Rasmussen?
So this would be to vote on the amendment as read by Ms. Tao. Begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
And this was something that had been discussed previous to the meeting, hence the reason why we're doing it right now, so to speak. So my apologies for any confusion.
And now you can vote on the original motion as amended. Begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
We'll see you in a week and a half.
Oh, good. Would you guys like copies of these? Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Melinda. And thank you, Mrs. Tao. Moving on for file number 19-1114, an ordinance of the Common Council amending section 10.20.080, no parking in restricted parking areas designated. Committee action is pending. I'll entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Gisselman, second by Mr. Nutting.
Begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
And file number 991104, a resolution of the Finance Committee amending the procurement policy regarding sole source determination. Committee action approved 5-0. The fiscal impact will be none. I'll entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Nutting. Do I have a second? By Mrs. Rasmussen.
You may begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
And before we move on to the possible closed session, or it could be discussed here, at this time, I'll allow anybody to come forward for public comment. If anybody's got an issue about tonight's agenda or anything going on in the city, now's your chance to come forward and speak. Ms. Grote, go ahead.
Okay, sure. So I just wanted to reach out to everyone and encourage people to think about becoming a poll worker. We have a busy election season in 2020. There's 5 elections, and I think people would be surprised at how much they would enjoy and how fulfilling it is to be a poll worker. You're really making a difference to your country and to your community. We have a variety of different jobs that you can do, so if you like paperwork, you can help out with paperwork. If you're not so much a paperwork person, we have jobs that you can do that doesn't entail a lot of paperwork. It's an opportunity to meet old friends, to see your neighbors. We have half-time and all-day positions, and just because you become a poll worker, if you are available one election and not on another election, you're certainly free to pick and choose the elections that you work on. But I think people would really find that they enjoy it and would feel good about making that contribution to not only the city, but to the country.
And it is a paid position,
And it
right?
is paid, yes. And
And
we,
for those interested, by all means, please go to the city clerk's office, speak to either Mary Ann or Mary Gady.
yes, and Human Resources approved a raise for our poll workers in recognition to the work that they do, and that will come to the next council meeting. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to come forward and speak on a matter? And one more time, would anybody like to come forward and speak publicly on a comment or a matter for tonight? Okay, public hearing is closed. At this time, we have a closed session item. If somebody would like to read that.
Mayor, if
Neal.
I might, I'd like to
Go
just
ahead.
mention that the only reason we agendized it for closed session was using the same wording we used at the last time the Finance Committee met on this issue. And they've met like 3 times on it. Rick Rubo and I have been at this for some time, and that was to protect the financial information of Impact 7. So if you feel the need to go, if you think you have questions about their financials, then you may move to go into closed session. Otherwise, it wouldn't be necessary if no one has any questions about their financial information that we need to protect and keep confidential. Thank you.
Mr. Neal?
Having reviewed it and seeing nothing there that really bothered me, I would go ahead and move to approve and open.
I would agree. Do I have a second? Mr. Smith? Okay.
And you may begin voting. Motion carries unanimously.
Take this. Okay. And Ms. Jacobson? Did you want to address this? Okay, I just want to double check. Okay, good. All right. I'll take a motion to adjourn, please. Motion by Mr. Peckham. Do I have a second? By Mr. Martins. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Begin
Thank you.
voting.
It's just been one of those days, sorry. No, I agree.
Oh, thank you. Adjust my survey.
Thank you.
Yeah, so then, you'll see.